In this video, I'll be demonstrating how to use Blender to make this image of a soccer ball. One of the Blender commands that I'll be using wasn't introduced until version 2.67, so you should check your version before starting this project. I'll be using version 2.68a. Let's start by creating a new project. So from the File menu, select New, and then click on Reload Startup File. Now delete the cube by pressing X. We're going to add some additional mesh objects to the Add menu. To do that, go to the File menu and select User Preferences. Click on the Add-ons tab, and then under Categories, click on Add Mesh. Then put a check mark here to select Add Mesh Regular Solids. Now press Shift-A and select Mesh. Down here under Solids are the new mesh objects that we just added. So select Archimedean, and then Truncated Icosahedron. Next, switch to Orthographic View by pressing 5 on the number pad. I'll also zoom in. This object has 6-sided hexagonal faces that will be the white sections of the soccer ball, and 5-sided pentagonal faces that will be the black sections. Let's set the material now, so click on the Material button and then click New. Now come up here and change this from Blender Render to Cycles Render. Then click the Use Nodes button. For the surface type, select Mix Shader so that we can combine two different shaders. Then for the first shader, select Diffuse. Then for the second shader, select Glossy. Set the roughness value to 0.03. Then set the FAC value to 0.2 so that the diffuse shader will be stronger than the glossy shader. Now I'm going to name this material white. We'll be adding the black color a little later. Next, press the Tab key to enter edit mode. You'll notice that there are edges in the middle of the hexagonal and pentagonal faces, and we're going to remove them. To do that, click on this button to switch to Edge Select. Then right-click on one of the edges inside of a hexagonal face. Then press Shift-G and select Length. This will select all of the edges that are inside hexagonal faces. Then press X and select Dissolve Edges. Now let's do the same thing for the pentagonal faces. So right-click on this edge, then press Shift-G and select Length, then press X and select Dissolve Edges. Now let's select all of the pentagonal faces so that we can change them to a black color. So click this button to switch to Face Select. Then right-click on one of the pentagonal faces. Then press Shift-G and select Area. This will select all of the pentagonal faces. Now come over here and click on this plus button to add a material. Then click this little button and select the white material that we've already defined. Then click this plus button to make a copy. Name the copy Black. Now set the diffuse color to black. Then set the glossy color to a gray color. Then down in the settings section, change the viewport color to gray. That will allow us to see it in this viewport window. Then click on the Assign button to assign this material to the pentagonal faces. Now we need to make a copy of this object that we'll be using later. So press Tab to go back to object mode, then press Shift-D to duplicate and drag it to the side. Now select the first object by right-clicking and then press Tab to go back into edit mode. Now press A to deselect everything, and then press A again to select everything. Next, click the Extrude Individual button, which will extrude all of the faces out from the center. And then press 0, and then Enter. The reason that I set the extrude amount to 0 is because I didn't actually want to move any of the faces. I just wanted to separate them from each other. Now press Alt-P to fan fill all of the selected faces. This command was added to Blender in version 2.67. Now click the Subdivide button and set the number of cuts to 8. Next, we're going to decrease the selected area a little. So press the Control key along with minus on the number pad 2 times. Now we're going to scale the selection, so press S, then 1.2, then Enter. Next, click the Smooth Vertex button and make sure that this value is set to 1. Now press Tab to switch to object mode, and then press the Smooth button. Now we're going to add a cast modifier to give the ball a round shape. So click on the Object Modifiers button, then click Add Modifier and select Cast. The cast type should be set to sphere, then set the factor value to 0.9. Now we have an object that looks like a soccer ball. Now is a good time to save what I've done so far. So from the File menu, I'll select Save As. I'm going to name this ball.blend. The next thing that we're going to do is to add stitching in between the creases in the ball. To do this, we're going to be using this object that we copied earlier. So right-click on it to select it, and press Tab to enter edit mode. Now press A to deselect everything, and then press A again to select everything. Then press X to delete and select Only Faces. We're left with all of the edges now. Next, we're going to divide the edges up into individual segments. So press A to select all of the edges, then click the Subdivide button and set the number of cuts to 24. Then click on the Edge Select button. Now from the Select menu, click on Checker Deselect. This will deselect every other edge. Now press X to delete and select Edges. What we're left with are a bunch of edge segments that will be turning into stitching for the ball. We want each of these edge segments to be separate from each other, but there are some corners where 2 segments are connected. So let's remove them. To do that, click here to switch to Vertex Select. Now look for a corner where 2 edge segments are both connected to the same corner, like this one here. Then right-click on the center vertex to select it. Then press Shift-G and select Amount of Connecting Edges. Now all of the similar corners will be selected. Then press the Control key along with plus on the number pad to expand the selection. Then press X to delete and select Vertices. Now we're going to change the overall shape by adding a cast modifier. So press Tab to switch to object mode, then click the Add Modifier button and select Cast. Set the factor value to 0.9. Now we need to turn each of these individual edge segments into a stitch for the soccer ball. So press Shift-A and select Mesh, and then Circle. Set the number of vertices to 8 to simplify it. Then move it to the right by dragging the green arrow. Next, we're going to scale it down, so press S, then 0.02, then Enter. Now convert it to a curve by pressing Alt-C and select Curve from Mesh. Let's also convert this other object to a curve, so right-click on it to select it, then press Alt-C and select Curve from Mesh. Next, click the Object Data button. I'll also zoom in so that we can see this better. Down here there is an entry box under Bevel Object. We're going to use this box to specify the circle object that we just added. When we do this, each of these edge segments will be replaced with the circle shape. So click in the entry box and select Circle. The thickness of the rings is the same as the length of the edge segments that were replaced. Now let's convert this back into a mesh. So press Alt-C and select Mesh from Curve. Then click on the Smooth button. Next, we're going to add a Solidify modifier. So click on the Object Modifiers button, then click Add Modifier and select Solidify. Keep the default thickness value of 0.01 and click the Apply button. Now click the Add Modifier button again and select Subdivision Surface. Set both the View and Render values to 1. Then click the Apply button. Now let's add more smoothing to these rings, which will also flatten them a little. So press Tab to enter edit mode, then press A to select everything, then click the Smooth Vertex button and set this value to 10. Now press Tab to switch back to object mode. Now we're going to align the stitching object with the soccer ball. But first, let's scale it up so that it's larger than the ball. So press S, then 1.2, then enter. Now while this object is still selected, hold down the Shift key and right-click on the ball to add it to the selection. Then from the Object menu, select Transform, and then Align Objects. Then to align on all three axes, click the X button. Then hold down the Shift key and also click the Y and Z buttons. Now right-click on the stitching object so that it's the only object selected. I'll zoom in close for this next step. Now press S to scale and scale it until the stitching is just barely visible. If you hold down the Shift key while scaling, you can get more precision. Now let's set the material for the stitching. So click the Material button, and then click the New button. Change the color to a light gray color. Then click this top material, and then click the minus button to remove it. Now let's add a surface for the ball to sit on. So switch to front view by pressing 1 on the number pad, then press Shift A and select Mesh and then Plane. Drag it down just under the ball. Then scale it up by pressing S, then 100, then Enter. Then set the material by pressing the New button. I'm going to keep all of the default values. Now let's add a light source. So press Shift A and select Mesh and then Plane. Then drag it up and to the right. Then rotate it by pressing R, then 45, then Enter. Then scale it by pressing S, then 3, then Enter. Now let's set the material, so press the New button. For the surface type, select Emission. You'll probably want to experiment with the strength value, but I'm going to set it to 5. Next, let's set the background color, so click on the World button. Then click the Color button and set it to black. Now let's set up the camera view, so switch to camera view by pressing 0 on the number pad. When I'm in camera view, I like to lock the camera to the view. So to do this, press N to open the Properties panel and put a check mark next to Lock Camera to View. Then press N again to close the Properties panel. Now I can zoom, pan, and rotate the view while looking through the camera. Now I'll position this to the view that I want to render. Now I'll switch to rendered view to see how things are looking. Well, everything looks good, and so now I'm ready to render the final image, but I'm going to save the project first. It's a good idea to save the project before rendering in case something goes wrong during the rendering process. Now let's set things up for rendering. So click on the Render button, then open the Sampling section. I'm going to set the number of render samples to 500. Now let's render the final image, so come back up here and click on the Render button. This image is going to take a while to render, so I'll pause the video until it's done. Rendering is finished, and this is the final image. To save the image, press the F3 key. I'm going to name this image ball.png. Well, that concludes this video. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe and leave a comment.